subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everyone, I am Seema and you're tuned into the Late Late Show with me. And today I've got my colleague with me here on the show, Lindsay Fox. Hi Lindsay.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming onto the show. How are you doing?
Good. Caught in a bit of a storm Florus up here in Scotland for the afternoon, so it's been a bit of a windy day, but other than that, very well.
Actually, yeah, the weather's. I'm not at home either. I'm in Bedford. I came to see my family, and yeah, it's just been raining like throughout the whole day, intermittently. But
yeah, it's just been wild here, and yeah, I'm up in Edinburgh and the festival's on, and they've cancelled the military tattoo for the first time in 75 years today. So it's been a big talking point in the wind in Edinburgh today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So do you go down to the festival?
I go to the festival, not to the tattoo. The tattoo's a mad old thing that they do. It's this big military thing that they do every night. But I love going to see the Fringe, going to various comedy shows. So I managed to get one show in this afternoon, and I'll hopefully get one in tomorrow before I head back to London. But I'm coming up in a couple of weeks to get a few more. But yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite things of the year.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You're from Edinburgh, or what part?
Originally from Glasgow, but I moved to Edinburgh in between primary and secondary school, and my parents are still here. So coming home, I come home to Edinburgh, but home is very much Glasgow.
Yeah. Must be nice, like as a change from London, because it's so much more green over there, and just a totally different environment, isn't it?
Yeah, fresher air. I was out at the coast yesterday, and my eyes were watering. I was like, I think I'm allergic to this. Allergic to fresh air. But no, it is nice, and it is a nice change of scene. But the good thing about both Edinburgh and Glasgow, they're major cities. There's so much going on, so you do get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's true. I just came back from like a nice long walk down by the river. They've got this really nice river here. You always see people going along like rowing. I only ever use the rowing machine in the gym. So
the same.
Yeah, so I can just sit there and just watch them for ages. I find it, quite calming. But yeah, I went there for like a nice long walk after dinner. And then here we are. So today we're going to be talking about some of the sort of unaddressed situations that we navigate as teachers and lecturers and what their impact is. Actually, Lindsay, do you want to tell everyone a bit about yourself and like what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Lindsay. I teach primarily at University of the Arts London, both at London College of Communication and London College of Fashion. But I teach across a number of different courses. They all sort of have a general area of communication. So I work at undergraduate, postgraduate level of PR, journalism, fashion journalism. But really everything is about branding, storytelling, social media, and communication. But prior to that, I was in industry, and this is where I think gives me a different sort of view, or a certain view when it comes to teaching. I had started my career in public relations, working for sort of major high street and global brands. Within the fashion industry, I also worked at a couple of national newspapers and things. So I came with that sort of industry practice, and teaching kind of crept up on me, because the way I got into it was I actually took a maternity cover working in the press office for London College of Fashion, and through there ended up staying for a number of years, started teaching, did my PG cert, did the MA in academic practice. So my route into teaching wasn't an obvious one, but it is very much shaped by industry practice opposed to sort of pure academia, which gives me a sort of different insight.
Yeah, that's interesting. Similar to me, I didn't sort of come in to teaching through academia either. And I actually started as a guest lecturer. I used to go around to different unis, and I used to love doing the guest lectures. But then I also used to feel like it's a bit of a TED Talk kind of effect, where you go in, you give a talk, and then, it's like great, everyone's really motivated, and they ask you lots of questions, but you wonder, does it last?
Yeah.
And I think when I was sort of keen to think, oh yeah, let me do something that has more of a regular kind of impact, or where you have regular communication and you can see how work progresses over time, there'll be something valuable in doing that. And so I came into lecturing more regularly. But let's actually start there, because one of the things that you and I talked about recently was when you're kind of doing tutorials. So this actually all came about because, I'm doing this research at the moment where I'm looking at how teachers experience giving verbal feedback to students during one-to-one tutorials. I spoke to Lindsay about this last week. We ended up having this really interesting chat and talking about all these things that we both felt are not really discussed, acknowledged, or talked about, right? And I think you also said, like, no one's ever discussed impact with you before. And so it ended up being a bit of a therapy session, didn't it? It was quite and I think, like, when I came into teaching, I love the buzz, and it's definitely rewarding and satisfying and all of those great things, but it also really takes it out of you. I know that, like, as an introvert, I would go home after like a full day of teaching and I just wanted to lie in a dark room. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to do anything, because I think my battery would just be like completely drained, not in a bad way, because I really enjoyed what I was doing. But I guess it was really different to working in industry, where you probably only had FaceTime with people for like maybe an hour or 2 hours in the day, when you had meetings, and the rest of the time you could kind of just be behind your laptop. Was it similar for you?
Yeah, there was that. I mean, the thing that I found, weirdly, I was getting some massage and I was speaking to the lady, got quite a friendly relationship with her, and I said, "Oh, you must be similar to me. You're giving out a lot of your energy each day." And she very quickly shut me down. She went, "I know how to protect my energy." And it really got me thinking, as of, you do give a lot to students, and even when it is fun and it is engaging or things, but when certainly I was in industry, you didn't feel everyone was looking at you for answers. You were part of a team. Whereas when
Yeah.
you're teaching, it is very much them and you, however collaborative you can be. So yeah, it can be incredibly draining. It can be incredibly rewarding. I don't want to sound like a moan throughout this, but it can be draining, and it is very difficult to shut off when you leave, whether your class finishes at 2. I sometimes do a lot of evening teaching, and it can be quite difficult not to take it home with you. And yeah, you are feeling very on all the time, and feeling very watched can be quite an additional challenge that, like you say, we don't often talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that there's a different kind of burden of responsibility as well, isn't there? Because as you say, when you're in a corporate office, you're all part of a team, you're doing things together, all the responsibility is not kind of on you to produce, whereas I guess students are quite often looking to you for answers. And
And it's that thing when you're having a bad day in an office, you can say to your teammates, "I'm just going to stick my headphones on, just going to sit quietly, I'm going to do this." There's no doing that. You've got to, yeah,
It's so
in
true. And
the old
not,
PR terms, tits and teeth, put them on and smile and just get through it when you are having perhaps a bit of a difficult time.
yeah, that's so true. And not just, you know, go in and be normal and not put your headphones on, but you actually, it's like you really have to perform, don't you? And bring out the enthusiasm. I don't think I could go into a class and be like, right, hi guys, this is what we're going to do today. Like, it just, I think I personally struggle to do it like that, even though sometimes I really feel like doing it like that. But yeah, you feel this kind of pressure and responsibility to go in and perform. And actually, someone said to me, as I've been doing these interviews about this whole tutorial process thing, he was like, you have to be an actor. And then he was like, you have to be a clown.
The clown, yeah, very much.
Yeah. And he was like, you have to constantly entertain. And it's true. And it's not that, I go into all my classes and I'm like, really, really overly enthusiastic. I don't think that would be me anyway. But just having to kind of, you always have to be on, don't you?
Yeah.
And then I guess, I at UAL, I also noticed the classes are really long, which I wasn't expecting. But because when you're a guest lecturer, you come in, you do a 1 hour lecture and then you're done. But and even when I was at uni, actually, I used to go to my lectures and seminars separately, whereas we tend to have, I don't know how it is on your course, but we tend to have like 3 hour classes.
Yes, so we tend to, I actually quite like it. Interestingly, one of my units, a unit that I absolutely love, I do an elective unit in year 2, and I find it really, really energizing because it is elective. The students have actively chosen to be there, but the classes are 4 hours, and I run 2 back to back because it's such a big unit. So in theory, I'm talking for 8 hours. But what I made an agreement with the students and the contact time is actually, look, we'll do 3 hours, but you will each get additional tutorials throughout the thing. Is everyone happy with this? And they were delighted because they don't want to listen to anyone for 4 hours, regardless of how interesting it is. But yeah, 3 to 4 hours is a challenge. I mean, that said, it's good. Something that I take in when I've done my studies and some of my research is the sort of physical environment for students. And one thing that certainly UAL students are up against, but replicated around the country, is they are working part-time, they have other commitments. So to be able to come in and do intense 3 days a week rather than bits and pieces throughout the week does work better for them. But you're also then up against the fact that they are exhausted, they have these other commitments, and it is difficult to keep them entertained. And something I feel a lot of pressures to make it feel worth the while. I mean, I had a couple of students last year who were commuting quite a significant commute, and their train was £50 a day. And I really felt this additional pressure to really make this day worth their while, that travel, which shouldn't be part of our job, but it was just this additional thing that I had in my head when I was talking to them, that this really has to be all singing, all dancing to make that extra £50 for you.
That's so interesting. I also feel like the class size makes a big difference, because what you said about people like sort of wanting to be there. I teach on the BA and the MA, and I do find that in the MA people are generally more invested. I can't say that for everyone, because you get loads of BA students that really want to be there too. But I don't know. Yeah, it's always the group as well. It's about a third of the number of students on the MA, and I just feel like you can kind of get a lot more stuck in and get your teeth into stuff. There's a lot more discussion, whereas I feel like when you've got 60 students in one place, people don't want to speak as much because there's this huge audience almost, and so they're like a lot more exposed when they talk, whereas when you've just got 20 people, it's very different.
It is interesting because what I then find is the same students will speak, and then that creates an atmosphere where the others go, well, why would I bother if they're always speaking? And then again, that's an added thing that you're always trying to balance in the class. How do I give everyone a fair go? but I also don't want silence, so I can't be discriminating these students who are really engaging, are wanting to talk. It becomes a real juggling act. And interestingly, I was reading some of the NSS free comments on a course recently, and I saw this comment that really struck with me that I hadn't really thought of. And the student had said, "Why do teachers keep wanting me to talk? I am someone who likes to sit and listen and observe." But in our heads, it's always like, if don't let them sit quietly. If they're sitting quietly, they're not enjoying it. If they haven't said anything, and you're constantly engaging them, and that really did give me sort of pause for thought earlier the other month of, oh, we are expecting all of these students to conform to a certain way and be really chatty, be really engaged, when actually it goes against a lot of their nature. And then it becomes my personal anxieties of, oh, they're not speaking, so therefore they must hate what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
that sort of thing comes into it as well. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I don't want to say it is a challenge, but it is an increasing challenge with all of these different students wanting a very personalized experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to actually go more into that point that you make about it being a juggling act, because I've not really, again, these are things that we just don't talk about, right? And we don't acknowledge. So you feel them and you experience them all the time, but it's never really discussed. But before I do that, I just also want to mention that this show is brought to you all in partnership with John Catt Educational, who are publishers of professional development books and resources. They support really great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you want to level up your own professional development, you can visit johncatbookshop.com and explore their kind of full range of titles. And if you want 20% off your order, you can use the code JCTTR2425. You could also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which is Sound Bites and Insights, which goes out to 10,000 educators a week. It's got a really good selection of 4 of the standout TTR shows from the week, exclusive discounts and offers from sponsors. So definitely sign up to that on our website, which is ttradio.org/newsletter. So going back to this point about things being a juggling act, you know, that situation that you describe where you're in the class and you've got that one person that's always like wants to answer every question, and then you're kind of looking around at the class and you're like, right, anyone else? But then you also don't want to reject that one really keen student, but at the same time you want other people to contribute, and sometimes it's the same 1 or 2 people, and it is really difficult to know who to sort of pick on, right? In fact, do you do that? Do you call students out and say, oh, okay, what about someone from that table over there, or take the name of a student, or do you tend to avoid?
I don't tend to do the names, but I will say, right, table 1, any opinions, table 2, to try and make it as wide as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel maybe I would be better saying to the student, what do you think? But I don't feel comfortable doing that. So I'll tend to go to tables, although as the relationship builds with some students, if I know one of them has a particular interest in a subject, I'll maybe try and get an analogy to what we're talking to and bring them in. But yeah, I think just sort of pointing to tables and trying mixing it up. But it is, as I say, you don't want the silence, you don't want to reject the student, but it's something I've been very conscious of. I mean, particularly one of my courses that I teach on is getting increasingly smaller cohort each year, and this year we've only been 19. And that has raised a whole new issue where I'm actually starting to see them getting bored of one another because they're all learning. So this summer, I'm sort of prioritizing looking at how to best teach in small cohorts and do some research into finding it, because even though they all like one another, you just start to see the eyes rolling, or you can see the body language shift when it's like, oh, that person again, or this. And I've spotted that in a couple of classes, particularly when you've maybe got students who are quite single issue or dogmatic about particular subjects, and you just find I can see the students. I certainly see that in my journalism classes where the students are all generally very opinionated, and you
Mm.
start to see them get their back up a little bit. So you do become a bit of an expert in body language
Yeah.
doing this. But yeah, it's how do you balance it without shutting down those conversations? So yeah, pointing to a group, asking for them. Another tactic I'll do is things like, right, guys, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to discuss this in chat. I want something from everyone, and
Mm.
really sort of try and shape them rather than making it a bit more like ad hoc. So I might actually stop the conversation we're having, get them to go and work just to sort of mix up the pace. But do
Mm.
say, right, in 5 minutes, I will be coming. I want an answer from everyone. To do it, but it is, yeah, like you say, it's something to be really conscious of, and it's something I'm becoming increasingly aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it easier to do that in seminars where, you know, they've got a set task to work on. And so you can kind of say you want each group or table to produce something and feedback on it. But I don't know about you, when I do my lectures, I try to make them more conversational as opposed to just me talking at them for an hour. And that's where I find that this is that, you know, behavior that comes up where you have one or two people that are just contributing to the conversation. And then I think you're right that other students tend to lean on that and then go, oh, okay, well, they're probably going to put their hand up and say something, so I don't really need to get involved. But then I think, as you say, you do end up reading body language. If I just see a slight, I don't know, flicker of an expression on someone, and I feel like they're about to say something, but they're thinking twice about whether they should or not, I try and, you know, encourage it. And yeah, and then sometimes they'll be like, oh no, I was just you know, thinking something, or oh no, I was just yawning. But yeah, sometimes that does prompt others to get involved, and then they do, and then that's great when they do.
I mean, the one that, again, it throws my anxiety, and I never know if it's about me or about the other students, but you can see them and they're clearly all messaging one another. They're sitting beside each other typing, you see the smirk coming across their face, and I've had that, and unfortunately, I've let that rattle me a little bit before when I've seen it. And as I say, whether they're doing that, talking about fellow students, whether it is actually about me when I'm talking, but it's difficult to sort of separate yourself. And even though you are professional, even though you're doing it, you are still, like we say, putting yourself out there. You're giving all this energy, and
Mm,
them sitting messaging on their phones or messaging their laptops or smirking, the sort of school child in you all of a sudden goes, "Oh, nobody likes me," and it can sort of knock you off your pace a little bit. And that's something, again, following on for our conversation, is we don't really talk about this. There's this expectation that you go in and you're steel plated, nothing affects you. You go in and you perform brilliantly, and the student's behavior, or the way they look at you, or the way they're talking to one another doesn't impact your performance. That the in it that's something that is brilliant, and I really loved our conversation last week, that I was able to talk about this, because it's not something you can ever discuss with anybody. But yeah, sometimes they can chip away at your confidence slightly.
yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you mean, especially, you know, when you've really prepared for something, a lecture, and you sort of, in your brain, you have a view of how it's going to land. And then if it doesn't land the way that you've sort of expected it to, that can really throw you off. Or yeah, you see people on their phones and you're sort of thinking, okay, is this not engaging for you? Or, but you have to sort of juggle between the thoughts that you're having and
Yeah.
keep going, right?
Yeah, never
And
let them see any weakness, but just yeah, and also as I mean, again, we all teach every job. You have these sort of wobbles or these insecurities or anything, but it's like you say, you've then got these additional pressures that what are they taking away from this? Are they listening? Is it going to be fed back? Are they going to actually utilize this? Am I just wasting my time? Are they going to be asking me these same questions 3 weeks later? And I'm like, had you
yeah,
listened 3 weeks ago, you would have heard this.
yeah. Oh, that's always frustrating, isn't it? When you're or even when you get to sort of week 6 or week 7, and then someone's like, so what's the assignment about?
Yeah.
Just sort of like, but you can't kind of really show them what you're internally thinking and feeling about this. You have to sort of be really calm and reassuring and get them back up to speed, because you don't know what might be going on for them either, right? And so sometimes it's easy to assume that, oh, they just haven't turned up or they couldn't be bothered. But sometimes there's a genuine reason. And I guess the struggle that we have is we don't always know what we are or aren't potentially dealing with. And so we have to kind of, work with all the possibilities as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something a couple of instances. I had a student a number of years ago, and it was a 4-hour class, but he was coming in maybe 2 hours late. But then it transpired that he was actually working night shift as a security guard. So my argument was like, I'm not going to criticize you. I'm delighted that you're here, even if it is for 2 hours. So him walking in late, I didn't care if it impacted other students. I was like, you have got challenges that others aren't facing. And it was just that I was happy to give a bit of extra time to catch up. But then I had another student, again, these are students who have long graduated, who had an individual support agreement, had a number of different issues. So we were to an extent told, but some of their behaviours were shocking, and I do believe they were genuinely trying to push. So we were sitting one day, and this student just poured an entire bottle of water over the desk while all the students were sitting there, and got up and walked out the class. Yet in this individual support agreement, it was stated that I was not allowed to publicly acknowledge the student if they chose to leave a classroom. So
Oh,
this
wow.
all disrupted, but the rest of the class are looking at me going, "Why are you not addressing this? What are you doing?" It made
Mm.
look at me badly, and it's, as I say, the sort of different, trying to offer a personalised experience to each student without having a bigger impact on the
Mm.
wider group can be really difficult.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think we're put in these sort of situations quite often, aren't we? Where on the one hand, we need to sort of show empathy and understanding, but sometimes we don't know what we're working with. I remember a few years ago, I had some health issues, so I was off for a little while, and when I came back, because it was in the middle of the term, I was then sort of working with students that had failed a unit and trying to help them get back up to scratch so that they could resubmit and pass and graduate. But I was very clearly told that I shouldn't, if they try to sort of raise anything about why they failed the first time, I should not entertain the conversation. I should not get involved. I should not ask about it. I should not understand anything about it, and just focus on moving forward. And I think that's fine. But I think at the same time, when you're trying to help someone get to a place that they've previously failed in, I mean, there's also a part where you do need to kind of understand what went wrong the first time, right? And
Absolutely. And they
and I
want to
think
think
also they
seen
want to
too.
be heard as well, don't they? Like they kind of want to voice like what's gone on and tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that I think that's quite an unusual position that you were put in because, yes, you didn't mark it, you didn't, but yeah, it would be absolutely natural to say, look, this is where you went wrong, but this is what you could do in the future to almost pretend that that didn't exist or shut down that conversation.
Yeah,
That's a difficult position to put you in.
yeah, it was
And
really
actually
difficult.
an unnecessary position because the students want to think that we are all a team. And I mean, it's unfeasible the way they think, but they assume if they tell one tutor, every other tutor completely understands that situation, where in theory that should be the case. It obviously doesn't work, but they don't see us as individuals working separately. They see us as one unit, and when you tell one of us, it should be telling all. So yeah, that does sound. I mean, a slight aside, I was remortgaging last week and had to put in a complaint to one of the places about what had happened, and the woman said to me on the phone, I do not deal with the past, I only deal with the future. And that's exactly what you've been told to do with students, and it infuriated me so much. So I can only imagine what these students must be feeling, that they're not being listened to, they're not getting a voice, they're just being told, right, move forward. And as I say, the way that wound me up. I can imagine tenfold that being really annoying to students.
Absolutely. And they want to sort of voice out what happened before. Some of the students I was working with, they'd come on the first call with me and they were quite emotional about the fact that they'd failed, and they would voluntarily start going into it. And I was also told, if they do start talking about it, tell them that, you're not here to deal with that. But I felt very conflicted in that situation. I didn't feel comfortable turning to the student and saying, okay, I know you're really upset, but we need to sort of move on and focus forward. I mean, I sort of had to do a little bit of that, but I tried to find a bit of a balance between letting them be heard, but then sort of trying to focus them on what was ahead. But it was definitely a difficult situation to be put into.
Yeah, I can see their point, but I don't agree with that approach. And I think that was wrong that you were put in it, because yeah, we should be not, because even in industry that wouldn't be happening. You would have a reflection on what's gone past. And yes, of course, you can see language like, oh, look, I wasn't involved, but giving an objective view, and I can't speak fully on that. But giving that kind of language where they feel like you're listening to them, even though you are pushing them forward,
Yeah.
it's just unreasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that we talked about when we were chatting last week was this really kind of interesting point about sort of being diplomatic or going against your own nature. And it was really interesting because, so I'm Indian, you're Scottish, and I think both of us come from cultures that are quite direct. You say it as it is, and I guess that we were talking about how we've sort of had to be very careful about how much we use that. I mean, I guess you pick and choose because you know your students and you know who can handle you being direct and who can't, or if you don't know the student well enough, then, which can often be the case if you're dealing with a group of 60 and they're different groups of 60 across 5 different units or something. But that's also an interesting thing that we kind of have to navigate, I guess. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Sometimes you just want to go, well, yeah, that's it. And again, it's coming from industry. I said I worked in newspapers, I've worked in big global companies, and the nature of comms, you are quite direct. And I do try and bring a bit of that in, and I dress it up to the students as industry experience, but it is difficult. And I've had students where they've got quite emotional, and I'm not naturally someone who can sit and comfort someone who is upset. I try to problem solve more than I try to empathize to an extent. So it is very, very difficult. And it's something I do try and work on. It's something I try and get better with, but it's not something that really does come naturally to me. Things that I try and address is quite early on in the class. Like, so when the units start, I will say, look, I will keep hammering home that this is objective, none of this is personal, it's all in the work. I try and sort of pepper that in so that they do know when it comes to feedback that it's not an attack on them, but that, I mean, it doesn't always work, but I do try and set that up quite early. The other thing I will always try and set up as well is like really linking things back to learning outcomes, going, I might not like your work, but I'm not marking it because I like it. I'm marking it because did you say what you set out to do? Did you do? And I really try and emphasize how important it is for them to sort of justify everything they're doing and detach their personal from the work that they're doing. But no, it's not easy. And as I say, empathy is a challenge, and particularly when, I'll just say, maybe this is quite harsh to say, some of the student issues that I get, because we're now older, because you've gone through it all, you're sitting there in your head going, this is absolutely minor, this is nothing, what you're getting upset about. It's not, but of course it means a huge amount to them. So trying to find a balance, trying to bite my tongue can be quite is something I'm definitely working on. Thankfully, I've not had any major incidents where I've not been able to resolve things with students, but yeah, it is hard. As I
Yeah.
say, the Glaswegian definitely comes out a bit.
Yeah, I think I think if I look at my personality outside of, being a lecturer, I'm someone that's quite say it as it is. I'm quite direct. I think I'm empathetic too. I don't find that awfully difficult. However, the main thing that I come up against when I'm teaching and trying to be empathetic, it depends on the context, right? So when we were talking about tutorials, for example, like if I look at a situation where I'm generally delivering feedback where there might be a need for me to be empathetic, I'm usually in a situation where I've got like 10 minutes per student. And so I haven't really got, it sounds awful, but I haven't got time to be really, really empathetic, because I know that if they start talking about something, to really get into it and to have a meaningful conversation and interaction about it, you can't really cover it in a couple of minutes. But at the same, and if you've got a line of, let's say, I don't know, 14 other groups that are waiting to see you, you can't then spend that time. You can't afford to, because otherwise you're going to be there till like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then there's also this thing in your head where you're going, well, if I give them extra time, then I've got to be prepared to give everyone else extra time. I can't say, oh, I gave them 30 minutes and then everyone else, I said, no, you've only got 10 minutes, because students talk amongst each other as well. And then that can go down as a situation and as a
Yeah,
bit.
and it sets up expectations going forward. It is
Yeah,
difficult. I mean, to be honest, what my workaround for it is not a healthy one. It's just we'll do a short and then I'll revisit it and I'll meet with them again the following
yeah,
week out of time, adding additional time. I'll follow up with emails. And that's not necessarily the best way to go because it's not an effective use of my time. It's not the way we've been paid, all of this kind of stuff. But when you are dealing with upset students, that sort of stuff, I don't believe that really matters. And as I say, I try to be as flexible as I can. My logic being, well, actually, if I can give them this time, it does mean they'll be producing better work. It will make life easier down the line, etc. So I do see giving them extra tutorial in a few days' time, etc., an investment in their sort of mine and their future relationship. But it's not feasible, and certainly, as we both know, when you are working across multiple courses or doing freelance and things, and you end up slotting things in, it's not as black and white as everyone seems to think of, okay, I work 9 to 5, so therefore I will do this 9 to 5, or I'll block out this time and focus on this only, because you've got 7 or 8 things, plates on the go that you're juggling or spinning and trying to pick things up. So it can be tricky.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's another part of the job that's just not really talked about. It's not really acknowledged, but it's something we're doing quite frequently. And I think you're right. I mean, I guess you end up giving extra time and tutorials to lots of students, and that all kind of adds up, doesn't it, as time? But I mean, I guess it's just part of the job and what comes with the territory, but it is also, and I'm sure every job has their version of this, but
Yes, the
yeah, I think
equivalent of a project creep or something, and it adds. And I'd hate to ever think the students were feeling like a burden. I mean, this is
yeah,
certainly when I do this, it's never on the students, it's on the system that we have, or the time that's allowed, or the contact hours, rather than the students, because I think the students, with the challenges they have and with the expectations that are put on them for a degree, they absolutely should have access to our time. So I would never want them to think they're putting a burden, but I do think there are unrealistic expectations that we can just block out time, or we can just do that, or it's just fitted in, when it's just not feasible. I mean, you'll know yourself, and everyone listening will do, oh, can I just grab you 5 minutes after the class? Or if there is a 10-minute break, they'll come up to you on the break and things. And you never say no, but they're not seeing that as them taking the rest of your time, because they don't understand how we all work. They don't understand that I'm a fractional or hourly
Yeah.
paid or sort of mixing, and they shouldn't have to. But the university structure definitely needs to be reconsidered.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm a fractional member of staff, and if a student emails me and I don't reply by the next day, I'm getting like a follow-up from them. And I'm
Yeah.
sort of thinking, if I only work like, technically 2.5 days a week. But there's this other thing as well, right? Where students think that you're just working for them.
Yeah.
And they don't sort of realize that you're dealing with probably 60 of them and across multiple units on different courses, as well as maybe another job or something. And
Yeah.
so,
And as I say, it's more because again, I do believe that they have a right to our time, and they should be able to ask these questions and things.
yeah,
I do think increasingly they're not, I mean, no matter how good Moodle or whatever virtual learning pages people are using, no matter how much information you put out there, no matter how much you tell, they are going to come directly to you and ask, because they're so used to quick communication now. So whether it's they'll happily send you a message or they'll happily contact at any time of day, there's just this expectation. They are that kind of age group where they're just used to everything on demand, and they're more inclined to ask you rather than going searching out the information. And that's something I'd love to see being improved. On
yeah.
their part, not their expectation on our time, but their gumption to go out and find the information that's readily available to them.
Absolutely. So another thing to mention before we move on, there's still, I don't know how the time just goes so quickly when we're chatting. But yeah, another thing to mention is that if you're looking for another great education podcast, you should definitely check out the Chalk and Talk podcast with Anna Stoke. Anna's a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. And on her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods and how-to guides, for teaching math facts, to tips for evaluating research show claims. And she brings on really great guests, from educators and researchers to policymakers, and discusses issues that directly impact teachers and students. So Chalk and Talk is for anyone that's interested in education, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. So do check that out. Lindsay, another thing I want us to touch on, which we kind of started talking about when we were having a chat last week, and it was a really interesting topic, was around kind of boundaries that we have with students. So, for example, now obviously we have a very different teaching context, and it's totally different to when we were at uni. But how do you feel about connecting with your students on social media?
It is a tricky one, because the thing is this, and this is an area of research for me and interest anyway, is this is how they communicate with one another. So they really don't see it as a boundary. They don't see it. So I mean, I have all my social media locked down. I wouldn't accept students, etc. But the tone and how they message you, or the expectations, or whether, I mean, we talked about, do they go on WhatsApp groups, do they send messages, etc. And just how quick, if it is very, very difficult. And I raised an issue when we were talking where I had a quite scary incident where a student managed to get hold of my calendar and he was turning up in classes that weren't with mine. He turned up at another university that I worked at. He kept turning up into tutorials, kept phoning me on Teams, and he actually then hadn't realised he hadn't hung up and left quite a nasty 5-minute tirade on Teams, not realising I'd listened to it, etc. And the level of access that they have, that particular, I mean, this was an extreme thing. The student was suspended, but it did frighten me slightly when it talked about these boundaries and say the fact that they feel comfortable adding you on social media or following you or sending you a direct message is a real challenge, and it's something that, sorry, I keep saying everything's a challenge, but I mean, it is, that's what we're talking about, challenges within teaching, but it's something that's going to become increasingly important in how it is to see the communicate. Our students don't read emails. No matter how many tell them, "Oh, I don't read emails, I don't look at this." I mean, I've certainly talked about with colleagues of should we have a course phone that we would be able to send out message blasts that wasn't attached to one of our numbers. There's all of these different conversations. I mean, another instance this had when I was working more on the communication side, we actually had a student contact the college's main Instagram via direct message because they would like to change their master's program halfway through. And that really shocked me that that was their first port of call rather than their tutors who they had relationships with. But it is just this instant messaging. They will go to whichever message platform is easiest for them at that time and contact through there, and they just expect a response. So we really need to narrow the avenues that they can reach us, but it doesn't fit with just their communication styles and how they're growing up. So boundaries are constantly shifting, and I think these conversations need to be had.
Yeah, and that's such a interesting point that you make about how the students sort of reached out about changing their course. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's true. There's the practical aspect, right, of them getting in touch about something to do with the course. But then that's also sort of blurred with what if they just want to connect with you on social media? And how do you sort of feel about that or navigate that? And is it okay or is it not okay? I remember during COVID when I was teaching online and we were doing, video calls and stuff on Teams. And then I can't remember, there was some sort of issue and my student couldn't get onto Teams and we were scheduled for like a tutorial, and then she was just sort of like, can we talk on FaceTime? And so I was sort of like, yeah, okay, because we didn't kind of really have any other option. And so we spoke on FaceTime, but then obviously she got my number, and then when I wouldn't reply to an email straight away, she'd message me on WhatsApp. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable about getting a message from her on WhatsApp, because I was just sort of like, yeah, this is not how I communicate with my students, right? And I think the first time I sort of replied, and then I started getting messages from her on there more regularly. And I was just sort of like, no, this isn't okay. So then the next time she sent me a message on WhatsApp, I sent her an email as a reply. And then I think she sort of understood, because I just didn't really reply to anything on WhatsApp, and I just sent her an email. But it was very awkward for me because I sort of felt like that was a boundary. And
It
so
absolutely is. And yeah, you needed to do it at the time. But yeah, it opens up, and it's not necessarily a fault on her part, but again, they're just not seeing any difference.
yeah.
Whereas, I mean, I had a student who followed me at the time my Instagram was open. She followed me. I didn't want to block her, so I just blocked her access to what she could see, because it felt very aggressive to block her and remove her, and I thought that would become a talking point. But yeah, when it comes to things like WhatsApp, the other thing I do find is I was like, this is personal. Now, it's my phone. I don't like it. Now, of course, there's the safeguarding issues and everything. They are adults, but it also comes from working in industry, working with clients. So you always want an email trail. You always want that kind of thing to back you up. Whereas if you are using social media or WhatsApp or anything as a communication tool, I just say no. So I think you were absolutely right. I'll just move it over to email as soon as possible and try and limit those. But there does become, and certainly because we are in comms, we are active on, well, to an extent on social media, we have presence on there because it comes with the nature of what we do. It can be very difficult to say, well, actually, don't follow me or don't do this. And I know some colleagues who have got big social media followings and big presence will actively use their social media as a teaching tool, as a way to engage, whereas I just do not in the slightest. It's locked down, it's for my friends, it's for my family. LinkedIn's there if they need it. But I think, yeah, just narrowing those communication channels is vital.
Yeah, I think I have sort of like mixed feelings on it. So with LinkedIn, I'm sort of like, I'll connect with anyone and everyone. And I actually encourage my students to get on LinkedIn. And then I'm like, I don't mind them connecting with me because I want them to sort of get used to using it, connecting with people and all of that. And because it's a professional network and I don't really have anything personal as such on there, I don't sort of see that as a boundary being crossed. Whereas, and it's not necessarily that I see that they're crossing a boundary if they follow me on Instagram, for example, because mine's open anyway. But I think it does cross my mind as to whether it's appropriate for me to follow them back or not. So I just don't follow them back.
Yeah.
Unless they've kind of graduated or, I don't know, I've like had a really good relationship with them over the years. Like there's one girl who I'm connected with her on Instagram, and, she graduated a good few years ago, but, we had a good relationship when she was a student. I see what she's doing and I'm like, okay, I think that's fine. And yeah, I don't know, but it definitely crosses my mind. And especially when they're still there, if I don't know, if it's a student I don't really know that well, and then they start following me, I kind of, I would definitely hesitate. But I wouldn't remove them either, because I wouldn't want them to be offended or feel, you don't know how they're going to take it, do you? You
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. So it's it's a strange one. I mean, as I
Yeah,
say, I made a conscious effort that my social media is locked down, and that wasn't just for teaching. That's other instances, and also I teach social media. I talk about it a lot, and I'm very much a do as I say, not as I do. I'm not that active on Instagram. I'm not really. I don't put myself out there in a way that a lot of others do. So there isn't really anything worth them following, but it is a conscious effort that I don't want them. I don't want to have those sort of relationships or boundaries crossed. Because, I mean, even for example, an ex-student, lovely student, followed me from one of my study abroads. Really, she was an excellent student, love. But of course, what you're then seeing is holiday shots and stuff. And I was like, why am I being
yeah.
exposed to pictures of students in their bikinis? As lovely as these students are, you're not my demographic, you're not my peer group. Why am I? What are you expecting me to do with this? I mean, what did make me laugh a number of years ago, I had a group of Brazilian students who were over, sorry, they were Mexican students from Mexico City. They were doing a summer over the UK. We were doing 3 classes, and a number of them followed me, and I've stayed following them. This was in 2019, and they've all had babies, had marriages since. I'm like, why am I liking these people that I just met? And it's all this sort of thing, but it is a sort of what's in it for either of us.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
And
my
then
big
you
one
kind
that
of
keeps
end up unfollowing because you're like, I don't think I want to see this.
yeah, but again, is it an act of aggression? Because you're then also
Yeah.
conscious, and whether this is just me, you're conscious that you are an ambassador for the university, the college, etc. So anything that you do, if it upsets the student, it has a knock-on impact. And that might be me being too introspective with it, but you are conscious that that could be an issue.
Yeah, you are. And I don't know about you, but these topics have never been raised in our meetings, in our course get-togethers, in our program meetings. I don't think I've ever had this conversation with a colleague.
No,
I think
I
you're probably
do
the first.
wonder, I think you, I, a couple of our colleagues that we are more of a group with have all come from industry. And I
Yeah,
do wonder if these are unique challenges that industry tutors are dealing with because we are more present on social media. We are friendlier or chattier to them, and that they
mm,
maybe have a slightly different relationship to us than to the pure academic. I mean, maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but yeah, like you say, it never gets brought up.
yeah,
There's not hard and fast rules. I mean, I would like to say I had a student who was telling me she was a study abroad student in her home university. She'd actually matched with one of her tutors on a dating app, and I
mm.
was horrified by this.
Oh
But
my
she was
gosh.
talking about it, and I was just like, so it did make me think. I was like, well, what are the rules? Are these things? But I guess social media is changing so quickly that there's not actually time to write these into rules within thing, because they're maybe having to deal with them as these cases come up rather than thinking ahead to what could potentially come up.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy as well, isn't it? I remember when I first came into lecturing, I was sort of in my late 20s, mid to late 20s. And so there wasn't even that much of a gap between me and my students. And I think actually some of my students were older than me, particularly on the MA. But of course, you don't talk about these things, right?
Yeah,
And I definitely felt like I had to be very careful about boundaries, and I definitely treated my male and my female students differently. I couldn't help it. I sort of had to, because I was very overly conscious that, I didn't want any lines to ever be crossed or misinterpreted, because as you say, when you come from industry, you are a bit more chatty, you are a bit more
yeah,
friendly. But then, if that was ever if you ever had a student behaving in a particular way, I would get very serious, and I'd sort of have to shut it down straight away.
yeah.
Not directly even, but just through your demeanor and the way that you speak, or in response to a situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had this recently where, I mean, I've had it earlier in my career, but recently I was the head of a unit. I was leading a unit, and I purposely gave one student a male supervisor because I didn't want to subject my female colleagues to a potentially difficult situation. And you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to be dealing with that sort of stuff, but unfortunately,
Mm,
it is a consideration. And this particular student, I had some discussions about them because there was a slight manosphere Andrew Tate sort of viewpoint that had come up a number of times, that you were then having to address that, making sure other students felt comfortable, but not
mm,
shutting that student down, because they do have a right to talk in this. And it's something you are now having to be much more aware of, particularly with male students, where
absolutely.
these views come through.
I even had a female student once who talked to me about uh, her sort of interactions with another one of my colleagues, a male lecturer. And I remember when she was describing things to me, I remember feeling very uncomfortable about what she was telling me. But because some of the, in terms of the communication channels as well, and having access to this person on the phone and via text messages, and even though it's about the work, but I sort of felt like there are boundaries there. But then again, because none of these things are ever talked about, you have to tread very carefully in how you deal with those types of situations, because maybe it's completely innocent, maybe it's completely normal, but we don't know what it is because it's not talked about. And so
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if there's no legislation for it,
yeah,
it's if there's no rules, then it's so open to interpretation. And
it
are
is.
we putting our perception onto it when actually it is completely innocent? But if the student's enough to tell you, where's your duty of care? I mean, these are issues that are just not thought about. And it goes back to what we've said of we are just seen to be seen as these robotic, you come in, you do your job, none of these things should impact you. And there is an expectation that everything is perfect and every relationship with every student is the same. And there's parity across the board, and that unfortunately cannot happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has been a really, really fascinating discussion, and a nice sort of extension from the chat we had off air last week. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for
Okay, thank you for
agreeing to
having
join
me.
this. Now, before you go, one of the things I always ask my guests to do is a quick kind of 3-minute masterclass on anything you like that will be valuable to our listeners. So what have you got for us?
Well, I gave a lot of thought when you asked me this, but one thing that I really try, and this is something that I'm increasingly conscious of the older I get, is my experiences are so different to their experiences. So I really do put a lot of effort into what is popular culture, who are they talking about, who is important to them. So my masterclass is making sure you know what's trending, even if you don't care. I keep telling them, I was like, I don't care who Sabrina Carpenter is, but it's my job to know who she is. I don't care what this stupid Jet2 holidays trend is. So my advice to everyone on my masterclass, and again, it's very difficult without being, as the youth say, chronically online. So my piece of advice is something I have a sort of private Instagram set up where I just follow certain news outlets, certain magazines, certain publications, certain meme accounts, etc. I also have an email set up that just has all this. So it's not getting mixed in with my own personal social media. It's not getting mixed in with my own email. It's just there for me to go in and check. So whether it's a Sunday evening before the classes are starting, whether it's an hour, but I'll always go in and go, right, what's been the top 10 trending subjects? And something I do, because again, something I'm increasingly conscious of is I never want the students to think I'm trying to be cool or I'm trying to be like them. But I do try and draw parallels. So something I start every single class with is what's been interesting to you this week. And I get everyone to do it in the group. So I'll get ranging from Formula One to a really specific thing or to some huge global news. But I really try. And then at the end of each class, I say, I will be asking you the same thing next week. So please come in with a story. And I think being able to do that, and they'll be like, oh, did you hear about blah, blah, blah from Love Island? I was like, no, tell me about it. And I try and factor this in because I think the more you can learn about these things and make sure that because something I'm really conscious of is academia and everything is changing. It absolutely is. So the more
Yeah,
you can liken it to their experience rather than to get them to stop what they care about and listen to your experience. I mean, I'm still in industry, but it's been the best part of a decade since I was properly in industry. My experiences are becoming so redundant so quickly. So my masterclass is try and factor in whether it's 15 minutes on a Sunday night reading up on it, going into the sort of showbiz news. I hate to advocate the Daily Mail to anyone, but I try. One thing I've always done is I try and read at least 4 or 5 different news sources every day. So I will read places like the Daily Mail, but I'll also be on Guardian, etc. But try and find out who's important. If you see a name, I mean, a big one, we got weeks talking about Katy Perry's In Space and try and liken that to your subject. So, yeah, trying to understand their lingo, understand what they care about, and then try and draw some parallels with what you're doing, and what you're talking about is my biggest piece of advice, because their experiences are becoming so vastly different to anything that we grew up with or anything that we worked with. I mean, even pre-pandemic is just a lifetime ago to them. So trying to be interested in what they're interested in without being a creep is my advice.
I think that's such great advice, and it's such a useful kind of reminder and tip to give people. Actually, I remember years ago when I used to watch Love Island, and I talked to one of my I can't remember, it just came up as a reference with a student, and she was so excited about the fact that I knew what was going on in Love Island. And then every week, you know, when she'd come into class, she was like, "Oh, Seema, did you see the latest episode? And oh, did you see what this person did or that person did?" And it was a great point of connection, you know, and
Absolutely.
and it would get a bit of a laugh going in the class, and then, you know, and then we get into the serious stuff, and it was great. But it was just, yeah, it was a really good kind of point of connection. And so
Yeah,
I
and I
think
don't think we should be snobby about this. I think that kind of mix of high and low brow is really,
yeah,
really important, because you can always draw parallels with it.
100%. Yeah. Thanks, Lindsay. That's
Well,
really,
thank
really
you very
valuable.
much.
Yeah, thanks for this chat. And I'm sure we'll have a few more of these off air, and maybe we'll get you back on air as well
Yeah,
another time,
yeah,
to talk
been great.
about anything and everything. Cool.
All right, well, thank
Right.
you.
Well, good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and hope you enjoyed the show.
Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.